I was given a skateboard for Christmas when I was around 6. And then there was actually a skate park opened up when I was around 7, and I got a membership to that. And I learned that I had a natural aptitude for it. And then I kind of, based on whatever was going on and where we were living in my life, I kind of put it to the side for a little bit, and I got more into BMX, and so I was always kind of into sort of going fast and jumping over things. And then I picked it back up again when I was 15, and then I went pretty deep into it at that point, and I kind of got way more serious and started skating ramps and learning how to skate all the different types of terrain. And then eventually I started getting pretty good, and I started actually riding with and competing with the people that I looked up to in magazines. And then I found that I was attempting to make my way up the ranks and getting sponsored and traveling and doing demos and endorsements and stuff like that. And then I ended up having like one really bad sort of like catastrophic leg injury, and that
fall.
Yeah. And that kind of, there was numerous injuries over the years, but this one was like the one that brought it all to a crashing end.
They add up after time, I suspect.
Oh, well, I am testament. Yeah, right now it's like getting out of bed is like, I kind of have like that old aging football player thing happening right now, where it's just like the amount of soreness is like kind of ridiculous, but it's just it's sort of like, I would like, not to sound all macho, but I wouldn't have traded it. Like for everything that I experienced and like all of the excitement and the endorphins and the intensity over the years, it's just sort of like the trade-off that you kind of have to put up with.
So you stopped doing it in your teens?
No, this was early 20s. Okay. Yeah.
It's still been a long period of time, but you're still carrying those battle scars with you? Yeah.
Well, oddly enough, the funny part of the story, the biggest ironic part of the story is that my life was so immersed in that, and as soon as it literally came to a crashing end, and I immediately started channeling. Once I knew for a fact it wasn't going to operate at that intensity anymore, I took all that energy and started pouring it into music and like learning how to like record and write. And I was super lucky that I had something that I could kind of pass the baton off to. So that's how it played out. And I continued. Eventually I got the big surgery that enabled my knee to start acting like a normal knee again. And then after years of rehab, I started writing again, but like just really sort of like, on a funner, kind of more recreational, like less seriousness, and with no intention of like getting it back or whatever.
That would have been a terrible idea, right? You said literally years of rehab. I can't even imagine.
Yeah. And then because of that, I started getting more and more into cycling again, building up my leg strength. But then, it was like skateboarding has never really left my life. It's like I still have, and even at this point, I have friends in 40s and even up into the 50s who still ride like kind of casually and stuff. Meet up, drink some coffees and roll around at the park for, half an hour and then call it good.
It's an interesting thing about your teen years, though, that you could have such a passion for something and then just kind of give it up and then try something else. Like it's a period in your life when you're able to do that. But it sounds like you were pumping everything in skateboard, and then you're like, I'm going to do BMX for a little while.
Well, when I was really young, I was just, it was like whatever was available.
Sure.
It's just, and if you're lucky when you're a little kid, you find those outlets in the first place. The thing that saddens me the most, when I hear about all these kind of like, wayward, I just find it's really important for kids to find these confidence building activities that give them self-esteem and, give them confidence. There's actually there's a certain Instagram site, and it's something like, it's like bad girls. It's like mugshots of girls that have gone to jail. And it's kind of sort of funny as it could be. I actually look at that and it's just like so sad to me. It's like every single one of those kids just didn't find that one thing that was going to sort of like lift them up and empower them and just, teach them confidence and, teach them how to figure out problems and go to the dark side.
What role was music playing in your life up to that point? It was a very specific moment, a very specific thing happened, and you were able to transfer that energy. But was music important in the same way previously?
I think that immediate point was more about like, I'm going to no longer kind of sit by and like, I want to be part of it. I'm going to immerse myself in it. But up until that point.
Were you playing at all?
Yeah. Like I started off as a drummer when I was really young. I played drums in high school, and then I had drum sets like when I was a kid. It was like, that was my first instrument. I had a lot of interest in music. I just dabbled a lot. Like I didn't have any proper lessons or anything, but there always seemed to be like some instruments laying around. And I have a suspicion that if any one of those things would have been forced upon me, it would have been a completely different outcome. But I think just because of my personality, I think. And my mom likes to take a little credit for it. She said that she would watch me from a distance and see that I had interest, and she would just kind of like place things in front of me, You
would wake up with drumsticks under your pillow one night?
Yeah, no, seriously. Which I think is it's a great strategy, Like, let the kids think that they discovered it on their own, and there's something a little bit more special about it, I think.
When we're in our, early mid-20s, we're all looking around anyway. We're all basically trying to figure our purpose in life. That's not a unique story from that standpoint. Did you feel lost at that point?
I definitely put all my eggs in one basket with skateboarding, and I kind of had to make a decision that it was all or nothing. There was no safety net. And if for some reason it didn't work out, I was screwed. And that's kind of where I found myself. You
were screwed for a little while.
Yeah. And I literally, I was having withdrawals. Like I didn't know what to do with myself. I mean, I was having nightmares. Like there was a part of my life that I was so driven and so in it. And like, I ate, slept, breathed, either at the time or what's coming up. It was just like, I was pretty much obsessed. It was just all consuming in my life. So with that gone, I was obviously a little lost. And I was actually back at my parents' house, just kind of healing, just wondering what the heck is next. And I think it probably wasn't even a year. I was probably within a year. I realized for my own sanity and for my own sake of survival, I needed to start pouring all of that into something.
You needed something to obsess over.
Kind of, yeah. And I may have really lucked out, too, because that was right around the time where it started becoming more of a reality. I'm not even sure what made me decide that was going to be music, but there's probably not a whole lot of other things it could have been. But I think that in the place where I lucked out was the fact that home recording gear was becoming that much more accessible and that much more affordable. And the idea of having your own little home studio made up of a few $100s worth of gear was completely realistic. I just started, I just started working random jobs. I started acquiring gear, one piece at a time. Eventually I got this really strange job, through one of my girlfriend's dad. It was like a hazardous waste, it was like an industrial waste treatment company that would go on site to these big corporations and clean their wastewater.
You had to wear the hazmat suit?
All of it, yeah, all of it. All kinds of certifications and stuff. And he kind of went out on a limb to get me this job. I was pretty young. I was the youngest guy on the crew, but I made really good money. And all I did was buy musical gear with that. I didn't really live anywhere. We had different accounts, so we'd stay in hotels. So I'd saved a lot of money, but all I did was just sock away money and just buy gear, sock away money, buy gear. So
it didn't feel like a hobby at any point. Music. I mean, it sounded like something that you were like, this is this is my next job.
Yeah. That's interesting that you. I mean, it probably was. There was years where I was dabbling.
Sure. But when you're literally pouring all of your money into it and, and it sounds like you're buying things that a hobbyist doesn't necessarily need, but a professional musician does.
Yeah. And doing research, searching out recording magazines and learning what you need to and just studying, probably listening to music differently at that point where I'm just it's more of a, research in addition to enjoying I could be listening to the Pixies and just be going, yeah, this is great. The energy is incredible. But I'm how did they get that sound?
Yeah.
How do I do that?
When you're skateboarding, there's kind of a pretty objective measure of whether you're good at it, right? I mean, it's pretty clear, if you can land a trick, the crowds, all of these things, it's pretty clear whether or not you're a good skateboarder. Yeah. Music it's a lot more subjective. At what point was it clear that you were good enough that this could actually be a thing you could do professionally.
Well, I will make one point though, because one of the things I loved about skateboarding was there's so much room for, like, there's so many different skateboarders.
Sure.
Had different styles. And they had, like, some are, like, super sketchy, and they could pull all kinds of, like, really insane stuff. And there were some who were, like, super smooth, and it was, like, a real joy. It's like ballet. It's like you could really kind of tell their personality by the way that they skated.
Where did you fall?
I think I had more of an emphasis on being smooth and, like, having, like, a good style. Like, I wasn't really interested in, like, super high airs and, like, you know, tons of flips. And, like, actually, when I was at my peak, like, you know, the 540 and, like, the 720s hadn't even come around yet. It was more, it's like, are you into airs or are you into lip tricks? Like, lip tricks is, like, the more technical stuff on the coping and stuff. But I was leaning more towards the less pompous, less jockey.
You're more of a street than vert?
No. I was like, if anything, I love the fluidity of, like, you know, skating parks and skating vert. And so, I mean, there was plenty of airs. It was, and plenty of technical stuff, but it was, I was more into the kind of, you know, the poetic and, like, in the way that certain pros would assemble their routines or they call them lines. It's like you put together a line or you put together a routine or whatever. It's like the tricks that you can choose to do any one number of tricks, but the ones who, like, there were certain tricks kind of, like, said certain things about people would lean towards certain ways of skating. And I was definitely into the more kind of artsy sort of weirdo guys than like the ridiculous sort of, like, you know, guys that are out to get the chicks and go as high as they could.
But it was definitely something that you knew that you were good at. Like you said, you knew that you had an acumen for it. Like, you knew. Yeah.
I mean, I was like, I'd pushed through enough different levels, and then, like, everything started coming together. It's like I'd got all the basics down. The ability level was like, I wasn't doubting that anymore. I actually got to a point where I was just like, and it's kind of an amazing point that you get to with some things where it's just like, it's like you could just decide what you want to do. It's like, oh, that's the trick I want to do. So you just kind of hunker down and you learn that trick. It's no longer like, wow, I wonder if I could ever do something like that. Like, you just start deciding this is what you want to do, and then you start doing that trick. But it just, you know, it takes a bit of practice and stuff.
I mean, was music the same way from that standpoint? That, you know, you listen to the Pixies and...
I feel like one of the things is still interesting to me, and I've seen, like, a multitude of times over the years, is, like, how many parallels do exist with skateboarding and, like, the mind and body working together. And yeah, the creativity, but then like grace under pressure, and, like, how smooth yet how, like, intense, you know, things can be at the same time. It's, yeah, I mean, I'm constantly, and have constantly over the years, found so many parallels with skateboarding and music.
Do you think that the new record scratches a similar itch from that standpoint? The songwriting process is less 2, 3, 4 minute songs, and it's more about...
Are we talking about this last... This last thing that got made?
Yeah. The thing that we're here to talk about.
Yeah.
It does seem like it's more of a product of being in the moment, though. And it does seem to be, if you're going to make a comparison to these two different styles of skateboarding, it does seem to be more of that sort of smoother, more free-form version.
Yeah, I mean, I had absolutely no problem going back and forth between, you know, some Beethoven sonatas, and I'm saying that even back when I was in high school, you know, I had an equal affinity for really beautiful, slow, dreamy, lush music.
You mean playing or just enjoying?
Just enjoying.
Okay.
You know, to, like...
That would be an entirely different conversation if you were just had an affinity for playing Beethoven sonatas.
I mean, it was important for me to realize that back then. Yeah. I mean, I think I just realized it on accident. You know, I love Metallica. I love Suicidal Tendencies, you know, Fear, you know, Dead Kennedys, punk rock, you know, high energy music that you want to...
very much was the music of skating at the time.
Exactly, yeah. And, but then I had this whole other part of me, you know, when I'd go home, which I loved, really lush, and even kind of like slower new wave stuff, but then, like, you know, I love classical music. And it was just, if anything, it was probably confusing to me at a point. I was just like, I don't get it. Like, these two worlds trying to live in my head at the same time.
There's not really a through line other than that it's music.
And it was a small town, like a small group of friends. I probably didn't have very many people who I could bounce where I could share this concern for my conflicting or seemingly conflicting ideas.
Was it a concern?
I had enough music that was total guilty pleasure. For instance, even to this day, it's like I'm a huge Aha fan. And there was a big period there where it made absolutely no sense with like the rest of the music that I listened to.
It certainly wasn't the cool thing to be listening to at the time.
No, not at all. And there's a handful of, other groups and other types of music that have come and gone over the years where like I could say the same thing about. I'm just like, it makes no sense, but like all I can do is applaud myself for just not really giving a beep about what anybody.
You can swear on the podcast.
Okay, for not giving a fuck what anybody thinks about what I like or don't like. It's just like I'm drawn to it, and I'm just going to own it, and somehow maybe if I'm lucky I'll even find some weird way that Aha actually compares to Kill 'Em All by Metallica. There might actually be some correlations there that are just not too obvious.
Do you feel like part of your job as a songwriter or as a music maker is to make those connections?
It's fascinating to me. I don't know if it's my job, but it's
but does that play a role in your songwriting?
I think I've always been kind of interested, like on a primal level, like why people even like certain things. Like why the sound of a snare drum has just turned out to be this thing that we absolutely have to listen to on every single song, like 98% of every song that's made. And even to the point of just like, the fascination with like why grocery stores are set up a certain way. And there's this whole science to like what steers people. And it's like how that even carries over into music. It's just like, it's just fascinating to me.
I guess, one part of pushing music forward on a personal and a larger level is finding those interesting juxtapositions. It's fitting existing things together in new ways.
Yeah. And I just think that I was that type of kid. And it's like the fact that I can continue to do this as an adult with like a little bit more wisdom and still keep chasing that weird fascination that I had that started as probably when I was a kid at some unknown point. I'm just kind of rolling with it. And I still feel like I've been kind of lucky too, where I can, nobody's really made it kind of beat me to a point to where it's like, you just need to quit, stop wasting your time with that. And
it seems like there were years when you need to
get down to business,
back away or take a break.
Yeah, though. Oh yeah, absolutely. So maybe I'm just happy that I'm even here, even saying all this, because the story was actually different for, certain points of, especially after the Grandaddy days, I was about as exhausted with all of this as I could have possibly been. But yeah, I got it back,
Did you feel on a personal level done with music, at least for a while?
It just wasn't that, the fun had been kind of sucked out of it.
Yeah. You metaphorically fell off your skateboard?
Yeah, and it just kept hurt. It hurt too much to like keep falling.
Financially, or in terms of like growing as a band, in terms of actually making the music?
There was a period there towards the end of Grandaddy where all it was like this big treadmill. It was and it just would not stop. And the demands, it's funny because for a while there, we had this joke. Somehow we'd always end up in the press. It's like the band always on the verge of greatness. And,
not on the verge of success, but on the verge of greatness.
Yeah. And I was like, and my response to that was like, I would never have wanted to be more popular. The popularity that we got was too much for me. If it was any more than that, it's like, who knows, what a mess I would have turned into. But I know that I couldn't handle, and that's just me. That's just the sort of person that I am.
Are you prone to self-sabotage?
Well, I need a lot of alone time. I need, my restorative, the thing that I figured out about myself is I need the outdoors. I need nature. I need silence. I need that restorative time to kind of make it all make sense, make the bigger picture make sense.
I had John Roderick on the show a while ago, and we spoke about the differences between introversion and extroversion. And I always sort of thought of it as, almost like how you behave at a party, right? Whether you're introverted or extroverted. And, he told me that he considered himself an introvert, which is surprising because, he's like not only somebody who gets up on stage and sings and podcasts and all these things, but is like very much a raconteur. And he said, to him, the difference is that, you can do all those things, but then you need to go home and recharge. Which it sounds like you're in a similar boat where you can kind of like perform and obviously, you know, speak well and with introspection about these things. But then at a certain point, you just need to like cut it all off and recharge the batteries.
Yeah. I mean, I had 2 things to do today. So I've been doing this long enough now to where I actually know how to pace myself. And I'll probably go really quiet after this, you know, and I'm gacked out on coffee right now too. So, but I will definitely, you know, this will be a big day. I did like an hour and a half thing before this and I'm doing this and that's a big day for me. Like all that sort of pouring out my thoughts and I'll get some rest and I'll be fine tomorrow. But like I used to not know the limits. Yeah. It just went and went and went and went.
And when you're in a van with a bunch of people touring around doing show to show, there's no time to really get away.
No time to get away. And even I think another big misconception too is that, you know, you get there, you play the show, but it never ended for me. It was like you get there, you get out, people want to talk before the show, you set up all your stuff, you're just like hoping everything's going to work. You pour your heart into the show and you break down your stuff and people want to talk to you while you're breaking down your stuff. And then like you get all your stuff packed away and then people just want to, and it's actually not really even quality communicate. It's just like it's all it is like people asking questions. It's just like questions.
There's this superficial stuff that people want to know, but also because, you know, you write songs and you do interviews, people don't really understand boundaries, I suspect.
Yeah, you definitely get a lot of those give an inch, take a milers.
Yeah.
And I really respect the ones who do respect the boundaries. Yeah. So thank you. Whoever you are out there.
Is that part of the recharging process, or I mean, does that sap your energy too?
The recording can be pretty exhausting. Just because you get to a point where you have really, really high hopes for a song, and there's like this. Yeah. There's this.
It's a certain way in your head.
Yes. If you're lucky.
Yeah.
If you're lucky, you're starting off with it being a certain way in your head. And then you're just chasing that down. And like the process of chasing it down, there's all of these really frightening periods where you're like, I am delusional. There's nothing here. I'm like, this is a wild goose chase. I'm not actually going to end up with anything here.
And you're literally like paying by the hour.
Well, I mean, I've been very fortunate. Yeah. Like I've had all my own studios. I do all the recordings myself, but it's wanting to be I'm not actually one of those people that records 100 songs and just like picks like the best 50. Like my narrowing down process happens and I'm like, all right, this 12 right here, I'm going to put everything I possibly can into them, making sure that they're as good as they can be.
Which is all the more frustrating if one of them doesn't make it all the way.
Just high hopes. Yeah. And some of them come together easier than others. And it's just those ones that just don't want to, but there's enough situations where it's like, I had to work so hard and finally it worked out. It's like I didn't give up on it.
Yeah.
But knowing that is kind of frustrating too, because it just makes you not want to give up on any of them. And sometimes that you should maybe just give up on it.
Do you think the ones that you like were particularly difficult end up being the better ones at the end of the day?
It's impossible to say.
I mean, they're nice stories, but they're frustrating at the same time. Like you hear the most famous one is probably the Keith Richards Satisfaction one, right? Where he like wakes up in the middle of the night and he hums a riff into, and then, you know, he has a song in the morning. You hear these ideas about people just getting like, you know, divine intervention or something and just being able to channel the music. And that makes it really frustrating on those days when it does feel like you're banging your head against a wall.
Yeah. I think there's something to be said though for, and this happens to me a lot. Well, you'll just get like, even if it's just like a little spark or, you know, lightning in a bottle or whatever. Like, and I do get a lot of those. And it's usually that in between wake and sleep period where it's like I hear, it's like I'm sitting there listening to the radio or I'm listening to somebody play this thing. I'm like, man, that's awesome. What is that? That's so cool. And then I wake up. I'm like, oh my God, that's mine. And, you know, I like run down to the phone or like whatever my recording medium is. And if you could just capture that, I feel like half the battle is like won because it's come from like this magical place that, you know, you could sit there and stare at a screen all day, you know, or like, you know, or read through Google News or whatever and just try to, you know, get some inspiration from wherever or go for a walk. But I'm just like, man, you got it. You have like this distilled magic thing just like visited you, you know, in this So it's kind of your responsibility to kind of harvest those little nuggets. I have a bunch of them. Just a matter of sorting through and making sense of them.
You're a runner, right?
Yeah, currently I have a foot problem, which is really frustrating. But yeah, I got into like distance running.
I've heard from a lot of musicians that like that's a very meditative state.
Yes, absolutely. Matter of fact, I was living in Montana for about 8 years, and I fell in love with trail running, which is even more so, just to be in the woods and out on the trails amongst nobody and like nice scenery. That was a big one. That was something kind of gets unlocked in the brain that when you're just sort of walking around seeing all these familiar devices and items and you're kind of clamped up in reality. And there's something just sort of like, let's go while running, especially running in calmer areas that I've definitely benefited from.
Do you always need to set parameters or constraints on something? It sounds like that was very much a big part of this record. The genesis of it was choosing the two instruments you were going to pick and then making music kind of based on those constraints you'd given yourself.
Yeah. I mean, this is, to be honest, it was like, this was the first time I've ever done anything like this before. And, once I really kind of settled into the idea of what I was doing, it was actually really, really fun, because anyone who knows the Roland Juno 60 synthesizer knows that you can get a lot of sounds out of this thing. And it's like, it's an incredible sounding old synthesizer that has a lot of sonic capabilities. So you could do a lot worse. The nylon string guitar, on the other hand, was kind of more, I was thinking they were going to be more equal in their contributions, but it's definitely more synth heavy, like the album is. There's something weird about nylon string guitars. It takes them, like once you string them, it takes them weeks to get used to your environment in your house. As soon as I strung the thing up, the bottom string broke. So I only had 5 strings. But yeah, it was 5 strings. Nylon string guitar. And because I didn't want to restring the whole thing again, just while it acclimated. But originally the whole thing was inspired just by like the way the two instruments look together. They're really pretty. Like they're both and both kind of like aesthetically like.
I was just gonna say, like, I've talked to a lot of musicians. I've never heard somebody say that about an album, that it was inspired by how pretty they look together.
No, that was like they sat next to each other. I had all my stuff unpacked in this apartment that I was living in and sort of arranged, and like the house was tidy, and there was 2 instruments that I hadn't quite found a place for yet, and they'd been sitting against the wall for a while together, this guitar and the synthesizer. And color scheme wise, they actually looked really nice together. And I kept like, in like random parts of the day, I just sort of glance over at them, just go, man, you guys are a good couple. This is like, this is, you guys are really attractive. This is.
They'll make beautiful babies.
Yes. But, to believe it or not, that's where the idea, I was like, man, might be a cool project to like make something with just you two, but I just sort of filed that away as like something I might do someday and probably will never get around to. But when my buddy Aaron Espinoza at Danger Bird asked me if I wanted to be a part of this project, that's when I kind of brought back up that idea. I was like, oh my God, dude, how about get this crazy idea of like making an album just made up of just these 2 instruments, and just like, because there was an emphasis on, it's, experimental instrumental record that's done. Wanted to make sure I was out of my comfort zone doing something that was not very typical for me. So it worked out good that, I'd kind of come up with that idea before, and I had like a great reason to see it through with the project with these guys at Danger Bird.
How many of those ideas do you feel like are just kind of filed away at any given time?
There's a lot.
With you having the conversation with Aaron, how quickly did your brain go back to that specific project? I mean, did you have to mull it over for a few days, or was it like right there at top of mind?
He had actually asked me if I wanted to be a part of the project before, and I remember I was in the middle of moving too, so I was a bit flustered. I started trying to think of ideas, and nothing was really coming to me.
What did he like? How did he pitch it to you? Like, what was the positioning? Like, what was he looking for other than just a musical contribution from you?
He actually didn't. There was no suggestion as to like.
He just wanted something kind of experimental
because I do like to have a little bit of focus and like some starting point. Obviously, experimental can mean can go on for ages. He seemed to think that me doing these shorter pieces. Oh, did he even suggest that? I mean, it usually starts off, do whatever you want, man.
Yeah.
And then you
and then you come back with,
try a few things and like, yeah, but I don't know if that whatever you want is like the right, whatever you want.
No, this is great. This is just not what we're looking for.
Yes, exactly. The main thing I wanted to know is like, how long should it be?
Yeah.
And then, somewhere around 30, 40 minutes came back to me. And then I think it was more interesting for me to have it be these little pieces that made up way more fun for me to make it like that, in that way. And one of the things I actually enjoyed about, which I think helped tie this whole thing together, the cool thing about, and I always even thought about this in the Grandaddy days, the cool thing about instrumentals is you get to call them whatever you want.
Mm-hmm.
You're not tied to you can come up with these really absurd titles and just that actually look good on paper.
After listening to your record, I went back and I just went on this whole aughts post-rock trip, Explosions in the Sky. Those guys know how to name. Was it the Earth is not a cold, dead place or something? Those instrumental guys know how to name a song.
Yeah, and it's that's kind of half the fun. Yeah, I was able to do that with this, and then it was somewhere between actual real things and real themes, things that I was seeing, things that I was going through at the time, but I was allowed to come up with these sort of colorful titles. And that actually set me on my path, which each song I found myself actually trying to, whatever image came to my mind by looking at that title, that gave me further focus.
You had the title before the song?
Yeah, oftentimes, yeah. Most of the cases. It was the title or the imagery. I was spending a lot of time alone, and I was actually doing a lot of cycling. I was in a new area. I kind of live on the water, outside of San Francisco.
Okay.
So there was a lot of freighters. There was a lot of shipping stuff happening. But then there was a lot of loneliness, and somewhere between spending way too much time by myself and being by the sea. That was a good starting point.
That is a good cross section of existential dread right there.
But it was also, I don't know. And then once you factor in the instruments, that nylon string guitar was kind of adding this sort of deserty, sort of Western thing to it. And then the synths, are just these super thick and gooey, that's just instant atmosphere. So I think a lot of that became the night sky and a lot of natural elements. So everything just kind of started gravitating towards each other, and all these different scenes and scenery and imagery started kind of just falling into place.
Were you thinking about the collective projects and, the fact that so much of what they do is kind of based around atmosphere, found footage, scenery, things like that? Was that playing a role in the songwriting, or was that just kind of a happy coincidence?
If anything, I think my buddy Aaron Espinoza at Dangerbird he was excited that I was going to go there anyways. Okay. He knows me really, he's one of my oldest friends. He knows me really well. And I think he just thought I was going to bring that regardless. So probably knew that, along those lines, it was going to be a good fit. We actually ended up teaming up with this Mind Palace studio, who ended up making a short film that's accompanying the whole thing. And those guys just really, that's where I think it really kind of bumped up to this next level, because I had individual ideas for each song, or where my head was at, where what was happening within each one, and I wrote them out some brief explanations, and they just went to work, and they kind of tied together this 20-minute. So there's this 20-minute film that is going to be presented along with this sort of condensed 20-minute version of the music as well. And it's kind of amazing. That's the part that I've seen it, the music and the film combo, and once again they were teamed up with me because they're this really resourceful, super creative. It's stop motion, but it's not, but it's and it's all done by hand, and it's all really, really elaborate, but scrappy, but beautiful. and it was kind of homemade, but like they messed around with like lots of lighting, and it's everything from like scenes in grocery stores to like, these freighters kind of going across, over the sea with like, and like one of the songs was actually, it's called it's called Geese Over Sunlight Ace. And like Sunlight Ace is this freighter, it's the name on the side of this freighter that I saw in dock like for a long time. And I had this image, which I have a lot. It was like imagining, in the middle of the night, somewhere out in the open sea, these migrating geese that are like thousands of feet above. I don't know if you've ever seen footage of like geese migrating. They do like this brief chirping thing. Mm. They're all just kind of talking to each other.
Yeah. In the V formation?
Yeah. There's something magical to me though about like sort of like the loneliness, but like the idea of like this freighter out on the open sea in the dark, and maybe like, a couple crew guys just out there smoking cigarettes, and then like 1,000 feet up in the air, these geese just, in the middle of like some 1,000-mile migratory trip, just like chirping to each other. So one of the songs I'm actually attempting to emulate that whole scene, like with the guitar and with the synth. But that's one of the scenes that pops up in the film as well. There's a lot of sadness and sort of stark stuff, but like there's deserty stuff, and then there's like, night sky stuff, and then there's like ocean stuff, and then there's like, grocery store stuff.
You come back to the grocery store.
It's pretty impressive. Yeah. And they've tied it all together in like a pretty magical way.
So you've got this title that's like it's like a short story, it sounds like, and you've got this whole idea of a story in your head. When you say that you're emulating it on record with the instruments, what does that mean exactly? Does that just mean some like abstract feeling that you get when you think of that? Or the sounds of the geese in this particular instance?
Yeah, no, I mean, literally, I was just like making squeaking sounds. Yeah. And like doing a multitude of them and kind of chopping them up and running them through these reverbs. And just, I don't know, you just, at some point you just kind of go into the zone and you're just like, this is what I'm after. I'm not going to stop until I've arrived. And that's just years of, utilizing recording tools and just like whatever knowledge I've gained of like learning how to find sounds. But as you can imagine, the challenge this time was only working with the Juno 60 and the nylon string guitar. But yeah, you can get a lot of sounds out of those two instruments. You
said Aaron kind of knew what he was going to get out of you in terms of like the direction that you were going to go in. But obviously, most of us, when we're thinking of your music specifically, we're thinking of the indie rock stuff. Do you feel like this is indicative of a broader general direction that you're going in musically? Is this where you are at this point in your life in the music you're creating, or is this kind of a one-off?
It's definitely opened my eyes to, I think it's good for my confidence to, to know that I could really
do something completely different.
Well, I lean pretty heavily on the fact that I love using lots of different instruments to make a song. I actually really love the idea of like, using real drums, using drum machines, using piano, using synths, artificial stuff, organic stuff, having vocoders, like be like, harmonies with like real voices, and just like that became a challenge of mine to see how cohesive I could make songs with like as many different types of instruments in them. So I think sometimes I may lean a little too heavy on that. So it was kind of cool for me to partake in this exercise where I literally just I was able to use plugins and processing like in the computer. I gave myself that leeway. Just using those two instruments was kind of a fun exercise for me to see if I could make it interesting. Yeah. And not just like, falling asleep and, because, I don't know, it is actually a good record to fall asleep to.
But exercise to me sort of indicates that it's not necessarily the direction you're going in, but sort of something that you were trying to see if you could do.
Yeah. It was definitely, this isn't some new direction I'm heading off into. I actually can't wait to like go back to, my kitchen sink process of just like loading songs up with as many instruments as I possibly can.
The sense of sort of solitude and the sense of, like really kind of, it sounds like creating music alone top to bottom in this case, that you were alone during the whole process. Is that the way you see yourself making music going forward? Obviously it's very different than creating music as a band.
I have a lot of experience doing it that way. As a matter of fact, most of the band stuff, I was doing it that way. I was put into the position of overseeing the writing and the production and the recording. And I actually preferred, there was only a number of circumstances where it was actually other people involved, aside from the drums. So Aaron Birch played most of the drums in the Grandaddy stuff, although I played a lot of the drums myself. But I actually, it became understood early on that was the best way for me to work.
You said before that you got put in that position. Do you feel like you put yourself in that position?
I had the most interest.
Yeah.
I had the most dedication. I had the most focus. It was, the songs were my babies. They were my creations, and they were, I think the one way that we were most unique though as a band was that we kind of had this whole live entity that was basically taking these compositions that I made and translating them into a live situation. And we actually did a pretty fair job at it. And everybody kind of that just sort of became the way that we did it, It only made it weird because, towards the end, when the whole tour cycle was done, the obvious exhaustion came from that. Everyone else just took a break and kind of and I was back to work again, and just this whole, if I wasn't completely busy, in one sector, it was then it was time to be completely busy in the other one. So I think that's where I started really wearing down after a while.
You feel like at this point you have a healthier relationship with your music?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And there was a period there where it was pretty much, that's why I had to shut the whole thing down, was because there was the possibility that I was just going to not like any of this anymore. It was just it was just going to get firebombed out of my brain. And I didn't want to have anything to do with it anymore. I had to get it back. I definitely had to let it, I had to re-nurture it and find the reasons why I loved it again. Dig around in there and find those reasons again.
And they're on this record?
Yeah. I mean, there is a sense of fun and wonder and playfulness that I hope is going to be a part of every album or every sort of, recording that I make. I think it should be fun. I think it should be, even if it's dark or not necessarily pleasant in subject matter, I think the process should be enjoyable, and it should be fueled by passion, doing it because you feel like there's something kind of special about what you're doing. I think all that stuff existed while I was working on this.
There you go. That was Jason Lytle of Grandaddy. His new record, Arthur King Presents Jason Lytle, Nylon and Juno, is out now. As I mentioned last week, this is the second of 3 Arthur King interviews that we're going to be presenting. Thanks so much to Jason. Randy Randall will be coming up next week. Thanks to you, as always, for listening to the program. If you like the show, there are a number of ways to support us. You can rate and review us on iTunes, Google Podcasts. We're on Spotify and YouTube now. Like us on Facebook. If you've got any feedback, it's rolcast@gmail.com. Follow us on Tumblr. That's rolcast.tumblr.com. That is the first and best place to get all of your RIYL related information. And that's about all we got for this week. So stick around, because we're going to be back just about this time next week with another episode of RIYL.